Let's check the time. It is now just about 8:30 on the east coast of Australia, Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. Well, right now in Washington, D.C., the sun is just coming up. It is 7 a.m. They're live. Again, we will not hear from Donald Trump in the next couple of hours, but we will hear from the man who was in the Situation Room with him, watching those B-52 bombers drop that massive payload. So you will hear from Pete Hegseth very shortly. The retaliation from Iran is taking place right now, where it is about 1:30 in the afternoon now in Israel. And in fact, there is very significant damage. The expectation is that there are going to be casualties here. But remember, the network of bomb shelters that exist under virtually every major structure in Israel means that many people are safe. But of course, you don't know that these things are coming. There is all sorts of warning systems in place. I'll talk to Shari specifically about that. Of course, she experienced that herself in the past few months about how that system works. But there is a lot of devastation as Iran is upping its game in its response to Israel. In terms of Iran itself, right now I can tell you that it is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They are 30 minutes further down the timeline from Israel. We are beginning to see some pictures from Iran, but there is some satellite imagery which is now starting to make its way around global news. I'll bring that to you tonight about exactly the main site. Now, remember, the whole reason the Americans needed to do the bombing was because they were the only ones with the bomb and with the planes to carry the bomb to specifically blast away at one of 3 major nuclear sites in Iran. The one that, of course, was the main focus was the one that was underground. And again, some satellite photos starting to come through, and Pete Hegseth with much more information in a moment or two's time. Now, all of our guests, all of the expert, all of the different opinion, including some of the talking points that are starting to come out of Iran. But first, 5 things, as always, when there's major news to tell you about, and 5 things that I think you need to be across tonight, after an extraordinary day, both in the United States and in the Middle East, and its effects when it comes to the safety of the rest of the world. Now, number 1, Trump hit hard, he hit fast. Now, because of the flying time and about exactly where these planes took off from, they were able, with some refuelling, to be able to involve in potentially as long as a 30-hour flight. The expectation was that it may not have been that long. Again, Pete Hegseth will give us the TikTok. And by that, I don't mean the Chinese surveillance app. I mean the what happened when, the minute by minute of all of this. Again, around brunch time today in Australia, we got Donald Trump confirming what he said was going to happen at some point in the next 2 weeks. Well, it of course happened within a couple of days. Specifically, it seems to have been aimed in and around the weekend. 1, because there wouldn't be as many people in those facilities. And 2, because there is going to be a potential response from Iran that may well affect the world oil price. I'll explain that in a moment. But first, the president informing the world that he had taken the step to help Israel and kill off the nuclear ambitions of Iran.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Now, remember, the balancing act for this president specifically was that he was called on by the Israelis to use the technology that they did not have. Now, as you know, over the past 2 weeks or so, Israel had been pounding pretty heavily away at the Iranian regime firing back into Israel. But obviously, the only way to get inside that mountain, to be able to break away where much of the work was being done to enrich uranium, to move it all the way up past anything to do with conventional say nuclear power, but to move it all the way up to weapons grade. Well, depending on particular batches and depending on particular intelligence services, some of that was at 20%, some of it was at 50%, some of it was apparently on its way towards 80% of being able to get to the place where they'd be able to use it for a bomb. So, of course, the man who campaigned against forever wars in many ways, putting together a coalition of people who say they had learnt the lessons out of long-time interventions into the Middle East, like places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, the message that he puts out there today is that this is as far as he's willing to go now, but what Iran does next means America has every right to respond.
There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes.
Now, I know that there's a lot of AI-generated images about exactly what took place, as if somebody was being able to film the incident. Obviously, no one's been able to do that, with the exception of the United States itself. And as I say, by the time we're done tonight, a 2-hour version of Paul Murray Live this Sunday night, we should have some of those pictures in and around some of the operation. Because remember, in and of itself, the United States has now shown that it is willing to use the technology, but for obvious reasons also doesn't want to show too much of its hand about how this technology gets used, not just in terms of the bombs, but also in terms of those planes. And again, some of them were based in and around Guam, some suggestions they might be in lots of other places around the world. They apparently were in and around the Pacific, according to some who have been monitoring those movements. But again, they're a stealth fighter for obvious reasons. We're not supposed to know. As to where they have hit, really important to see, okay? Now, there are more than just 3 places inside Iran where there is some sort of a nuclear industry. Now, this could be everything from the serious bunker that needed to be blown up. That's in and around that Fordo base. That's why they had to, remember, bash in. It goes about 20 stories down, multiple explosions as it goes. And then, like any other sort of precision ordnance, you've got to drop another one after that and try to go down a hole but expand it as well. There's obviously those 2 other locations, but that's not the only nuclear facilities. The assumption from the Americans apparently is that the Israelis will be able to handle those, but all of those seemingly above ground. But again, Donald Trump, keen for the world to know that in just a few hours they can change the world, change the trajectory of history, and if pushed, they'll do it again.
For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue.
So, again, you know that Trump hit hard and fast. Number 2 of the 5 things that I want to mention before we get into these broader conversations. Again, Sharry Markson, Chris Kenny, they join me in a moment or two's time. But put simply, Iran will decide what happens next. Now, obviously, Israel will continue its campaign to try to remove as much of the military capability of Iran, but in terms of whether the United States comes back into all of this again, well, we get to hear what the Iranians have to say. Now, they have given a press conference in the past 90 minutes or so. There's pretty strong messages that are coming across the propaganda via state TV, but in terms of their foreign minister, he's been very clear to say, or try to cast, that he was involved in a campaign of diplomacy. It's the Israelis in the United States that have blown things up. But of course, as always with these stories, what about before, what about before, what about before? This is a story that is decades in the making. And obviously, as we sit at this moment, it's a fork in the road about where it goes from here. Here, in part, was the Iranian officials speaking in Istanbul tonight.
You say that you need to respond right now, but we know that Iranians are known for their talents in negotiations, in diplomacy and trade. What would be the conditions after responding for Iran to come back to a negotiation table, maybe with the US as well? And Turkey has been offering that Ankara can mediate for a trilateral between Turkey, US, and Iran. What would be your response to that? Because right now the US is technically involved in this conflict.
It is irrelevant to ask Iran to return to diplomacy, because we were in the middle of diplomacy. We were in the middle of talks with the United States when Israelis blew it up. And again, we were in the middle of talks and negotiation with Europeans, happened only 2 days ago in Geneva, when this time Americans decided to blow it up. So we were in diplomacy, but we were attacked militarily. So it was not Iran, but the US who betrayed diplomacy. They betrayed negotiations. When at the middle of negotiations with us, they gave green light to Israelis, if not instructed them to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. I think they have proved that they are not men of diplomacy, and they only understand the language of threat and force.
Interesting, word war not used. Does that suggest that there's going to be some limited response here? Well, at the very least, there is a consideration from the supreme leader, the military officials, many of which, of course, had been killed. And, you know, metaphorically, once you cut the head off the snake, another will grow somewhere else. So the idea the entire military has disappeared in Iran is obviously not true, but there'll be people stepping into those roles. And as I said to you, while the back and forth between Iran and Israel and Iran has been obvious, the damage that is happening, and these are the latest pictures that happened just around the start of the day in Tel Aviv. Remember, of course, it's full up in sun and around lunchtime there now. That is an awful lot of damage right now, but because of those bomb shelters I spoke about before, fingers crossed, we'll have the scenario of well, fewer casualties, but there's going to be problems here. Jerusalem, we've got some pictures from there as well. This is a live picture of what is happening there. Some stills photography, which is starting to pop up. And remember, during all of this breaking news stuff, the homepage, skynews.com.au, skynews.com.au. The stills are particularly moving about people saving children in the streets of Israel. Now, the reason that I say that it's all up to Iran, what happens next, can I show you this next graphic? This is from the New York Times. Basically, every red dot, depending on its shade, is where American troops are. Now, obviously, Kuwait, which is just next to Iran, that would be a place, obviously, incredibly easy for Iran to be able to aim at. Now, currently, there's the situation involving Israel. That in and of itself is dire, but obviously we've seen that the Israeli government has been able to handle that. The next stage, the ratchet up here, is if Iran starts to aim itself towards any of those red dots. Now, obviously, if it's able to make its way from Iran to Israel, they're able to shoot something from Iran to Kuwait. But have a look at this one. Again, New York Times, where their short-range missiles at 435 miles will clearly cover off where the Americans are in Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE, or Qatar. Now, obviously, there's all of the geopolitical reasons as to why Iran doesn't shoot at some of those countries, but the idea about American facilities being that close. This has been one of the concerns about the so what's next, about the day after, okay? The day after, the week after, the month after, the year after, those red dots. As you can see as well, why they're able to get so many in towards Israel. Again, their medium range is anywhere between that 435 and 1,200 miles. All right, third thing I want to mention tonight. Obviously, Israel is safer because of the actions of the President of the United States. Now, they have been asserting themselves to make sure that a country that does not just have an ambition of a nuclear bomb, but an absolute stated ambition to wipe it off the map, that this is pushing Iran right back. Now, as you know, the Israelis have for a long period of time, well, the past couple of weeks, I should say, been hitting all around, lots of military stuff. Here again is a map from the New York Times. Every little dot there is where some of those missile strikes have fallen. The reason the Americans get involved is because there's this one place, it's really difficult, you've got the gear, you're on our side. Again, when you actually have a look at Tehran, their capital, you can see even further about just how many have not just been in and around the left-hand side of the country, as you would say, having a look at the map here, closer to Israel. But once you start to thump around, you can start to see lots of different things, including things like their state broadcaster, fuel depots, communications, all, of course, necessary when you're trying to blind what Iran can do, because even in its weakened state, it's still able to cause a lot of damage right now in Israel. For his part, Benjamin Netanyahu made a statement pretty briefly today, but powerfully in response to the actions of the president today. Have a look.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
All right, the next two I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because they are, yes, part of the discussion, but they're not the main game. I want to focus on the main game because we are still in breaking news coverage because of the first military response from Iran, the political response as well, and then the latest news we're about to get out of Washington, D.C. But the fourth one I want to tell you about is, yes, MAGA is strained over this issue, okay? However, it's not going to break. Firstly, apart from anything else, we are barely, and I think, in the next couple of days, 6 months into a presidency which is going to go for 4 years, okay? Many of the people who have bashed the tables with whatever intent, they all know that their proximity to Trump in many ways is their power. Their access to Trump is their power. I'm not imagining that any of them are going to want to burn that bridge with so much of a presidency still to go. So that's the first thing to note. But Steve Bannon, who of course at one point worked with the president, went to jail for not giving evidence upon subpoena in and around January 6. As MAGA gets, his program, The War Room, is basically the id of the MAGA movement. He actually had lunch with Donald Trump the day that he came out and said the 2-week thing. This was read by a whole bunch of people as, oh, he's listening to MAGA world, he's holding back. But obviously, Steve Bannon, after saying, don't go there, it's a quagmire, all the rest of it, well, he had rolling coverage himself in the United States today, and it's pretty fair to say, on early counts, he falls in line.
President of the United States tonight made probably the biggest and boldest move of his first or second term, right?
Sure.
What he doesn't want to do is get dragged into this thing, as we talked about earlier, so that it overwhelms his presidency.
And while he didn't want to go all the way to the full bended knee, etc., a MAGA loyalist former congressman in Matt Gaetz was brought on by Bannon as a guest to say this. So the smoke signals coming out of the War Room, it's going to be okay in terms of MAGA land.
There is no greater force for peace in this world today than Donald Trump. That man deserves the Nobel Peace Prize.
The Nobel Peace Prize discussion happening right now. By the way, Pakistan has actually nominated, or a Pakistani official has nominated Trump in relation to the Pakistan and India situation. Fifth one, Albo and Wong out in the cold. I will not waste a further second, but basically de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate is where they sit.